Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
And the surprises keep coming. There have been jobs for some of those who challenged her, while some big names have been sacked. And jobs for Brexiteers, as well as others who championed remaining in the EU. Michael Gove, who ran for the leadership, has gone as Justice Secretary and been replaced by the former Environment Secretary Liz Truss. The new Environment Secretary is Andrea Leadsom, who of course also ran against Mrs May. Out too is Nicky Morgan as Education Secretary, while Jeremy Hunt, the Health Secretary, currently embroiled in a dispute with junior doctors, stays where he is. Our political editor Laura Koonsberg has the latest.
Flowers on a day of congratulation, but commiserations too. The busiest people in Westminster today were the florists.
Third time now. Yeah.
Third time?
Yeah.
It's amazing.
But the Prime Minister was cracking on. Arriving for maybe her biggest job, getting her team right. It's not like they even get a job interview. Like Liz Truss, they turn up to find out what they've got. A cosy chat in number 10, then in her case, they walk out as the new Secretary of State for Justice. Or like Justine Greening, you walk in with one cabinet post and leave with another. In her case, education. My perfect job, she said, heading straight to her new department.
Are you looking forward to a new position?
I am. I'm absolutely delighted, so looking forward to getting on with the job.
No time to waste with new responsibilities for universities and apprenticeships too. Reshuffles, though, are strange days. Imagine being Damien Green, a senior MP walking up Whitehall, hoping, but not really knowing if you're heading for the cabinet.
Who knows?
Half an hour later, in charge of the Department for Work and Pensions, leaving in the minister's car. But a politician who's had few doubts about his suitability for high office was enjoying his first day.
I've got to zoom out. I've got to zoom in. It's been a very, very busy first day for me here at the Foreign Office, and it began really with a big speech to about 700 of our staff. And I set out what I think that we need to be doing and what we need to be focusing on. And that is reshaping Britain's global profile and identity as a great global player.
So who else is in? Philip Hammond is the Chancellor, essentially the number 2. Amber Rudd is the new Home Secretary. Eurosceptic Andrea Leadsom, who quit the leadership race just days ago, moves into the cabinet in charge of rural affairs. After some confusion over his role, Jeremy Hunt stays at Health. Priti Patel, also part of the Out campaign, is promoted to DFID, the department that runs overseas aid. And Chris Grayling, who ran the Prime Minister's leadership campaign, is now in charge at Transport. Today's losers did not have to face the Downing Street walk of shame. Theresa May told some colleagues in the privacy of the Commons if their services were not required. There are more than a few tweaks around the edges. George Osborne, the Chancellor for 6 years, is out, the biggest casualty. Michael Gove, his controversial friend, was also shown the door. And Nicky Morgan, who backed him to be the leader, met the same fate. Oliver Letwin, one of David Cameron's thinkers, is out as well. And Stephen Crabb, who ran for leader too.
This is way more than the usual comings and goings of an ordinary reshuffle. This feels more like a whole new government. Theresa May has taken big, bold decisions, and there's been a no-nonsense clear-out of some of the politicians who are seen by some as a clique around David Cameron and George Osborne.
There are some of the same faces, and some of the same controversies and problems too. But the government looks different, very different. And under Theresa May, what some ministers do will be different too. There won't be a budget within weeks now, as George Osborne had claimed there would.
We don't see any need for an emergency budget at the moment. I expect to make an autumn statement in the usual way, having spent the summer studying the effect on the economy so far, looking at our plan for the future, consulting with the experts, starting with the Governor of the Bank of England this morning.
Remember, these changes are all within the same political party. The same side is still in charge, but the new Prime Minister wants a clean break. maybe clearing old resentments and grudges too. Don't forget, these jobs really do matter. The politics is personal too. Laura Kunzberg, BBC News, Westminster.
The new look Conservative government has not been entirely welcomed in Europe. The President of the European Parliament, Martin Schulz, said its composition was an attempt to keep the Tory party together rather than focus on the future of the country. There was criticism too of the new Foreign Secretary, Boris Johnson, who was accused by his French counterpart of lying a lot during the referendum campaign. Our deputy political editor, John Pienaar, has more.
In a shock move, she named her party rival Boris Johnson as Secretary for Foreign Affairs.
Celle de Boris Johnson, ancien maire de Londres et chef de file des pro-Brexit.
Was kann denn die Bundesregierung von Boris Johnson und von der Regierung?
It wasn't just us who were surprised. Boris Johnson's been put in charge of quiet British diplomacy after a career strewn with colourful outbursts and more than the odd gaffe. Around the world, the reaction's been mixed. Some amusement, quite a lot of shock. On Twitter, the former Swedish leader thought it was a joke. The former Belgian Prime Minister did too. British humour has no borders, he wrote. Australia sent good wishes to a good friend, but others in France and Germany were less friendly. And Martin Schulz, President of the European Parliament, has described the cabinet reshuffle which made Mr Johnson Foreign Secretary as part of a dangerously vicious cycle since the vote to quit the EU. The criticism had come pouring down. French Foreign Minister Jean-Marc Ayrault said in an interview the new Foreign Secretary had told a lot of lies about the EU. His German counterpart called Mr Johnson's behaviour monstrous.
After a vote like the referendum result on June the 23rd, it is inevitable that there's going to be a certain amount of plaster coming off the ceiling in the chancelleries of Europe. It wasn't the result that they were expecting, and clearly they're making their views known in a frank and free way. I have to say that the gentleman that you mentioned, the French Foreign Minister, in fact has sent me a charming letter this just a couple of hours ago, saying how much he looked forward to working together.
Here in the UK, this was the reaction of one of Labour's leadership challengers.
They've just made him Foreign Secretary.
In America, they know about Boris Johnson's way with words too. He compared presidential candidate Hillary Clinton to a sadistic nurse in a mental hospital. And during President Obama's British visit, he wrote about what he called the Park Kenyan president's ancestral dislike of the British Empire. In Washington, which also took the losing side against the campaign he led to leave the EU, a State Department spokesman's face spoke volumes.
The Secretary has just been announced as Boris Johnson. How do you think...
That's better.
I mean, we're always going to be able to work with the British, no matter who is occupying the role of Foreign Secretary.
Boris Johnson addressed his new staff today, looking the part. That's what diplomacy's about sometimes. Colleagues say he's got the talent and brains for the job, but he'll have to get used to being a little less interesting. John Pienaar, BBC News.
I've been getting away with it all my